questions.
I'm down. Let's do it. Boom, says live on YouTube. I see the button. It says live. It says now streaming.
This is new to me, so this is exciting. I'm excited. We're just going to begin, and I'll say this is episode 93 of Our Modern Heritage, the Home and Family Culture podcast. And I'm super excited to have here on the show Jeremy Roadruck. And Jeremy is a best selling author, Kung Fu master, Pan American champion, former member of the military, former corporate wage slave, and former factory worker. Jeremy Roadruck has been through many seasons and adventures in his life. Today, he's a speaker, author, teacher, and consultant to families, teens, and kids, helping them to speak up and own their voice, creating their own emotional safety, and playing games worth winning, and share stories worth telling. Jeremy has worked with students ages 3 and up, including students with physical, mental, sensory, or attitude challenges, right? And helping them to play the game of life at a higher level. Welcome, Jeremy.
Well, how you doing, Jody? Glad that we made it. And I just posted
Yeah,
on my Facebook. I just posted the link to the YouTube live. So there we go.
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, that this is new to have it on YouTube. The Facebook connection was finicky, so we're just going
Yeah.
around it, working around the technical difficulties.
Well, it's a perfect metaphor for, you want to get results, not be right. So stay focused.
I like that.
Hmm?
I love that. So, how did you get into this? It sounds like, your journey was it's going through all these different, ways to end up where you are today with,
Mhm.
being an author and talking to kids and teens about, their conflicts in life and empowering them to tell their stories. That's so important. How did you
It
get to
is.
this point in your career?
Well, really, it's been a slow evolution, a slow progress. It started from I had a very unpleasant childhood, and I went through some stuff. I was unfortunately abused at 5 and 6.
Mm,
And if you haven't been around young kids that have been through trauma, a lot of times that will shift them into intellectually and internally more mature. So they become more sophisticated. They don't really respond to positional authority because I said so, pain, punishment type
right.
stuff. They become a lot harder to motivate and encourage. The thing was, nobody knew I had been through it because I had hidden it very well because I had blamed
Wow.
myself for what happened. And so for about 20 years, I was living through a bunch of patterns of anger and security and safety. I couldn't trust anybody else for my security. So I had to kind of manipulate everyone. And because I had a lot of energy before the abuse, I was raised on a leash because I would run into traffic. And 4 years old, I climbed
Wow.
on the roof of the house. So high energy kid, then you amp in the trauma. And I was just like, you ever play tic-tac-toe with a 7-year-old and for them it's life and death, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the energy that I brought to everything. And I realized pretty quickly that I was out of alignment. Like I was just too much. I was scaring people.
Wow.
So I learned to hold back and I learned to become a mimic and just kind of like, what's going on? Why is this like this? How do I need to show up to stay safe and not get noticed, but not get ignored? And so it made me very observant and just had a very interesting way of growing up. I was doing cross-cultural religious studies at 12. I was studying, why is the world the way that it is? And I was really drawn to Buddhist and Confucian and Taoist metaphysics and
Okay.
imagery. And so that's kind of, I swam from 8 to 13 and had a big battle with my parents for 2 years about quitting swimming. And when I finally quit swimming, I mentally and emotionally quit the family. So I would kind of grunt at them in the hallways and do what I had to do to get
Wow.
what I wanted. But it's kind of a jerk, kind of distant. And barely graduated high school, dropped out of college to work in a factory. But I started Kung Fu at about 20 years old. And that became a place where I could kind of reintegrate myself because come in as egotistical as you want, come in full of your ideas and your theories and your thoughts, and you got a room full of people that are going to hand you your butt in the nicest way
Right.
possible, but they're going to dump you on the ground and just own you. And so it took away a lot of my defense mechanisms and a lot of the ways that I compensated because they didn't care because they had other ways to deal with me. And so it became a really great place actually to get my body, my mind, my emotions to really start to integrate and start letting go of the defensiveness and the fear and the scarcity.
Wow.
And as I worked in the martial arts school, I loved being there. I was my first class I threw up because no boundaries, jumping jacks, push-ups, sit-ups, squats, puke.
Uh-huh.
Great. My Sifu Grandmaster Ming was like, oh, he's not coming back. And then 3 months later, I was 7 days a week. So I was working in the sandpaper
Wow.
factory, and I was there every day, every chance I could be, as long as I could be. And it was really great because he allowed, and he still allows, students to just kind of go and explore. And the thing he did that was really brilliant in the beginning when I first met him is he challenged me. He said, I've been trying to prove this stuff wrong my whole life. You should try it. And it was like, oh yeah, I'm smarter than you. I can do that. And yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still trying to catch up. It's been
Yeah.
24 years. So it was just a great vehicle and a great way to kind of bring everything back together. And then as I was a junior student, then an intermediate student, I'm helping out in the classes. A lot of the
Uh-huh.
kids that were a little bit harder to reach or didn't really respond to authority, I had a way of getting their attention, and we could play reindeer games together. I had a way of influencing them because I could read that energy, and I
Yeah.
didn't need to do the heavy-handed, grown-up, let's all be happy, big boys and girls, and be everybody friend, wonk, wonk, wonk. I,
Yeah.
I've never approached anyone with that kind of energy, and it was just kind of like, dude, that was nice. And then ignore
Uh-huh.
them. And they're like, wait, what? Like someone noticed me?
Yep.
And it's like dealing with a skittish cat, right? You don't throw a ton of energy at a cat. You just get stuff that influences them, like food. And 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 so it's that same idea with the kids. It's just, how do you bring them along? And it kind of grew from there. And then as I did this, I love teaching, and anything I understand, I can explain to pretty much anybody. So I loved working with the families and the kids, and unlocking this deeper wisdom and taking 1,500 years of information, and how do we translate that into the modern age. And so it took a lot of different experiences that I had growing up, and it just let me bring everything together. And so that's why, then after about 15 years, I realized, oh, because I've been doing martial arts and nothing else. Unless you worked where I worked or went to Kung Fu, I wouldn't know who you were. Because
Uh-huh.
physically we understand balance, but in life there was no balance. And so then I
Uh-huh.
started networking and like growing a school and getting out into the community. And it was really interesting when I went networking, because in the business community, a lot of people do their job, but they're not excited about it. It's not
Right.
passion for them. It's not meaningful for them. It's just a thing they have to do. And I would show up at these places excited and passionate and engaged and curious and all these different things. And so very quickly in the local community, it was like, hey, have you met that Jeremy? He's like the cha cha paha, the kung fu guy. And that's where that moniker of the kung fu guy came, is it was the easiest way for people to remember who I was.
Wow. So that is so, everything about your story is so fascinating, that what stood out to me is that this idea that it seems like from a very young age you were very self-aware, that you were
Mm.
just like, to be able to recognize the way people were responding to you and your high energy. That says a lot about your ability to be self-aware, because I think a lot of kids, they don't recognize, or I don't know, maybe they do, maybe you know better than me this, that kids don't necessarily recognize that, oh, overwhelming these people, right? Like, this is my higher energy is too much. And so when kids come into the kung fu and you were working with them, did you notice like what the difference was, if kids were self-aware or not, how that impacted their development and their ability to listen?
Yeah, usually the only kids that are really self-aware are the ones who've been through trauma, because they
Mm,
realize there's a gearing out of place, because they've actually matured intellectually. Emotionally, they're still held back. They're still regressed, but intellectually they're further ahead. So they tend to be a little more self-aware, and they usually tend to be a little more angry, a little more chip on the shoulder, a little more defensive, a little more sensitive.
wow.
For most of the kids that I work with, they're honest with where they are and who they are and what they are, and they just go.
Mm.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
fine. I know where you are. I like Tiggers because I know where you are. I can deal with that. That's easy to guide. Give me an Eeyore and I got to poke you with a stick and try and figure out what's moving you. And then I get an owl who's trying to lecture me, and like, dude, you're 7. You don't need to be lecturing me. It's cool. We're good. We got this. So,
Nice.
you get these different personalities, and it's like, great. So first thing I do whenever I work with someone, meet someone in a professional setting, is I start doing assessments on where they are developmentally,
Hmm.
intellectually, how they use language, and how they build their model of the world. Are they more auditory, visual, kinesthetic, or conceptual?
Yeah.
Because that will
Okay.
then change how I relate to them. And then I also have to do the same thing with the parents. I have to figure out, how do the parents learn, because the parents communicate in one way, their kids may or may not receive that. And so what to the parent is a disrespectful or disobedient child may be a differently focused child. And so
Yeah.
then kind of nuancing that conversation a little bit to say, well, here's something to consider. And then if you look for this pattern, you may notice. And then that way the parents start to realize, oh, my kid is doing their best. They are trying to listen. I'm making it too complicated.
Wow.
Uh,
So you do
and
coach parents like on getting to know their kids better, right? Like
well,
this is
absolutely.
comes coming back to just knowing them.
Yeah, well, it's being able to get retention. I want to have someone stay in the martial arts school for a while, then the parents really have to understand what we're doing. It's not come in, put on fancy pajamas and jump around, go woohoo. I mean, that's really not it. It's about
Yeah.
physical, mental, emotional, and social structure and how to build power and strengthen all those places. Right?
Wow.
There's a great book. It's called The Charisma Myth, and it talks about this idea of charisma and people that you are naturally drawn to, and the authors basically plot it as a X, and they say there's two factors. You got to have power, the ability to get things done, but then you got to have warmth, because if you just
Mm-hmm.
have warmth, people like you and they hang out with you, but they're not drawn to you because you can't get anything done. You're ineffective. But if you're powerful but have no warmth, no one stays around you very long. You burn people out. You burn through people.
Right.
So charisma is this
Hmm.
intersection of these two skills. And so it's like that idea we teach the parents, everything human beings do, it's a skill you can get better with practice, even breathing. We have, 1500 years of Chinese techniques in breathing and how to strengthen the lungs and how to do all kinds of really interesting things. Eventually learn how to get hormone control on purpose. I mean, there's some really cool
Wow.
stuff. The joys of no TV. You got to find something to do to entertain yourself,
Yeah.
right?
I
But
love that.
But like imagine if you needed to as an athlete, you could turn your adrenal glands on, turn them back off. Just you choose a focus and you can just burst the energy. Those types of abilities are available, but it takes a fair degree of body awareness, focus,
Uh-huh.
relaxation, self-control. It requires a bunch of skills to get there. And so for the parents, it's just starting to notice these patterns and going, oh, I'm coming at it this way, I'm coming this way, and my kid's coming at it this way. I see why we're crashing. And then how can we have a more harmonious experience at home?
So is that you're when you say parents come at it this way, are you talking about like parents are trying to be more aggressive, or parents are trying to be more results oriented, whereas the kids are like, hey, mom and dad, I don't know what you want out of me. I'm just trying to be myself or figure out myself, or, things like that. Is that
Well,
more like what you mean? Like they're trying to force this agenda on the kids saying you are supposed to behave a certain way.
sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you'll get parents that they are very auditory. So I had a
Oh,
family.
okay.
It's a mom, dad, daughter, and a son. And mom, dad, daughter are all auditory learners. The son is 5 and he's visual kinesthetic. And so whenever there's a family problem, they're going to sit around. They're going to talk about their problems.
Right.
And the 5-year-old is going, ugh.
Oh, boring. Right.
And the reason is it's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he doesn't love his parents. It's not that they don't love him. Is that he's not sophisticated enough in his language to hear what they're saying and then build a visual representation. Solution.
Right.
Write down the conversation. As you're going, you draw pictures about what you're talking about. And now he's more engaged because he can see what's happening. Right. And
Wow.
so it's not
Yep.
that, it's not that parents don't love their kids. It's just a mismatch in communication styles.
Wow.
Right. And
Wow.
then there are though the parents that are in positional authority and shut up and do it the way I say, the when I say, how I
Right.
say, look me in the eyes when I'm talking to you. And yeah,
Right. But you're talking about like real parents who are trying to be authoritative, trying to be, have a balance in this relationship and the responsibility of parent-child relationship, who are they just don't quite understand those different communication styles.
oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. I get
Wow.
kids that, oh, my kid's not focused. No, they're focused. They're just focused on not what you want them focused on.
Right.
You're boring and there's ants eating gum. They're gonna go watch the ants.
Yeah.
I get it.
Totally.
I'm still 12 in a lot of ways. I get it. So
Wow.
it's how can you engage your kids and meet them at their level versus expect them to come to your level. And to be fair, it's a two-way street. Your kids need to
Yeah.
stretch a little bit to work on their patience muscles and self-control muscles. It's not
Right.
a parents do everything, kids do nothing, of course.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
as a leader, you got to understand your team.
Wow. So you're saying like the parents are, because like that's something that I talk about a lot, is how parents are really like the culture leader in our home.
Mhm.
We lead out in the expectations and the feelings. I like this idea about the charisma, have balancing power and warmth, because I think that's a really good skill for parents to learn how to do in order to lead out as the culture leaders in their home. that to have that balance of power and warmth, because there's a two-way street. Another thing I talk about a lot is trust.
Hmm.
That it's a two-way relationship to have trust on both sides, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
the child, it wants to trust their parent that they're going to love them and coach them through stuff, but then the parent trusts the child to then develop as a person as well.
Right,
So
right.
do you see that relationship in your practice, in
Oh
family
yeah.
or otherwise?
Oh yeah, because your kids need some level of consistency from you, and little kids have a really hard time separating their identity from their behavior.
Mm.
So, I did something bad versus I am bad. And
Yes.
because they've watched enough TV shows, they know how bad characters are supposed to act. So if they take the identity that I am bad because I'm always getting in trouble, I'm always getting lectured, I'm always getting punished, I'm always getting time out, then they know how to behave because they see it on the TV shows. And that
Right.
becomes their identity. So we have to make that separation of I love you, I don't love what you're doing. And
Wow.
that creates it creates a break in that. And they go, wait a minute, what? Yeah, I love you. You're amazing. I think you're a fantastic at the sun shines out your butt. And you need to stop chasing the cat with a flamethrower. That's not okay. Flamethrowers go
Yeah.
outside, you know?
Yeah.
But it's that idea that it's helping the kid go, oh, okay, there's a right time and a right place for this behavior. Evie got in a lot of trouble. Evie's my 5-year-old daughter. She got in trouble a couple nights ago because they were coming to get me from the martial arts school, and she had two little plastic My Little Ponies, and for whatever reason, she took it in her head to throw them, and it hit mom in the head.
uh,
And when it hit mom, as mom's driving, she thought the car had been in a car accident, so immediately she went to attend. And so for the next 20 minutes on the way home, Evie was crying because mom was really unhappy with that.
yeah, yeah.
And that sort of a thing, it's like, Evie, we never throw things in the car. We don't throw things when people aren't ready to catch. But in that moment, we need to have her to have some fear of her behavior and her consequences,
Right. That
because
can be
that's one of
really
those things
risky.
that's like, yeah, that can be life threatening, because if mom had lost control and the car had swerved, everybody could have been dead. So we
Right.
need to have her to have some fear there. That I'm going to be okay with that. However, if we were at home and then she said, "Hey, catch," and then she threw a little bit too hard and one of those things hit us in the head and then we had that same level of energy, that's probably going to be inappropriate in that context. It's like,
Wow.
we could say, "Hey, that's not okay. Throw softer," or we coach her on her throwing. But we don't need to have that emotion in 25 minutes of crying. We don't need that energy in a
Wow.
different situation. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have witnessed where in my family as well as others, that imbalance of reaction to a situation where you're going, that did not merit a total
Mhm.
meltdown,
Right.
like
And
from the parent or child.
right, and I was gonna say the parents can melt down just as much as
Oh
the kid.
yeah.
We have those moments of just, "Rah!" But, in our family, we've made it's okay if you start to have a meltdown like that, just say, "It's not you, I'm outside," and we leave. We
Yeah,
just
yeah.
it's not you, and then we
Yeah, a
walk
lot of
away.
times it's triggered by other things going on, and then it just so happens that the kids
Yeah,
triggered it,
you
or
were
it
the
just
spark.
happens.
Yeah, you were
Yeah.
the spark. There was already a keg there waiting, and you sparked it. I'm sorry that that happened. That wasn't about you at all. And it's okay as adults to apologize to your kids too
Yeah.
when you lose control, because then you're modeling for them. It's okay to apologize.
Yes, exactly.
You're setting that standard.
Wow, I love that so much. That's definitely, I totally agree with that, because I think that, if your children see you apologizing, then it's possible. Like I think that comes back to speaking to your point about how this level of me, if it's I am bad versus I did something bad,
Mhm,
when you
mhm.
can apologize, then you're recognizing, acknowledging, and modeling that, oh, I did something, and
Right,
here I am now correcting that thing, or
right.
attempting to correct this thing.
Yeah, yeah. I'm offering the opportunity. I'm making restitution. I want to get back to one big happy with you, and then we can have that conversation.
Wow. So I want to go back to something you'd said about the skills
Mhm,
of managing your body, your emotions,
mhm.
things like that. Can you tell me more about what you mean by the kinds of skills, and what are they? What are more, go into more detail about what those skills are.
Sure, sure. So one of the things to understand is we don't have emotions, we do emotions, and more correctly, emotions do us, right?
Mm,
So if I put a screen and I put a person behind this screen and I said, okay, this person is depressed. What do they look like? I'm going to give you $1 million if you get it right. Could you describe what they look like? Right? Because Human beings, about 90%, we do emotions the exact same way. The chest is going to be down, the face is going to be down, breathing is going to be slow, the body's going to be soft, low muscle tone, low voice. Like there's this whole series of things we do. It's like a recipe. So think about like you're going
Wow.
to make a cake, only take the sugar out and put in just salt, no sugar at all. It's going to change the cake.
Yeah.
So we have these different emotional states. And because of those emotional states, then they will start to drive certain behaviors, certain thought processes, certain neurological structures activate in our brain. There's all these really cool things that come together. So because of that, we can start to then consciously choose how we connect to our emotions and how we show up. And when we realize sometimes we just it catches us and we get interrupted, we get drawn into, we can take a deep breath, we can break that pattern, and we can choose different. And so a couple
Wow.
of ways to do that. Number one, most powerful, most important thing is deep breathing inside your belly. Take a deep breath, breathe low and slow. What that does is it takes you out of your sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight, and it moves
Mhm.
you into your parasympathetic, which is your digestion and rest. And so you're literally switching your internal gears and your nervous system out of tunnel vision, adrenaline dump, cortisol, stress hormones, and you're pulling yourself back from that edge. So, first thing
Yeah.
always is take a deep breath, shoulders up, shoulders back, shoulders down, relax into the tension. And if you start from that, then you begin to center yourself physically, which then you get centered mentally and emotionally. And so
Wow.
that's one of the things we teach the students is breathing over emotion. But then we also have mind over emotion, changing what you're thinking about. Maybe try to think about when you're arguing with somebody or upset with somebody, try to think it through from their point of view and why they think that. Because human beings are always reasonable, even if the reasons don't make sense, the process of the reasoning
Mm.
always does. So
Yeah.
even
Okay.
somebody who is, schizophrenic, somebody who's having hallucinations, because of that experience, they will then do a reasonable course of action based on that first cause. If you understand the first cause, you go, oh, this makes sense now. And then we can redirect that or we can guide that. So
Wow.
deep breathing, changing what we think. Another one is start changing our language, right? Instead of getting frustrated with my kids, get fascinated with your kids. Instead of I'm
Mm.
so angry, I'm so irritated, I'm so peeved, I'm so tinkled. Because when you change the word, it changes the resources you call out of yourself,
Wow. Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
you can change how you show up in the moment, and then it's easier to, as a parent, I got to drop the hammer. Really? You got to drop the hammer? Really? How about you just put your foot down? Okay, well, how about we just make it clear? How about we just set some guidelines? How about we get on the same page, right? Because
Wow.
those
Yeah.
are all similar frames of reference, just different
Mhm.
levels of power that we can choose to access in that moment. And it's all self-talk. It's all just language. There's like 3,000 words in the English language for emotion, and most of us only use 20.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how many other things can you add? Instead of getting hungry, get epicurious. Get your kids thinking a little bit more. Shoe obfuscation in your conversation. So I used to read this.
You lost
Yeah.
me. No.
Well,
Yeah. No,
I have,
I
I
love
have a
that.
t-shirt. Issue obfuscation. It means make it simple in the
Nice.
most not simplest way to
In the
say it possible.
most complicated way. I love that. First of all, I love that you break it down, it's, scientifically. Like this is legitimately scientifically proven that if you breathe and you get out of your sympathetic fight or flight uh
Yep.
mode, then you can think more clearly. That's something that, I talk about with my 9-year-old. He loves to be in his fight or flight mode, and I have to constantly am like, hey bud, take a deep breath so you can have control over what you're thinking,
Yeah,
because
adrenaline is
you know
powerful and it's addictive, but
and
it also nerves your digestion. It'll keep him small and underweight if he doesn't learn to control it. He can actually fatigue his adrenals, and he can cause all kinds of longer term trauma as he gets older too, because his endocrine system is under stress.
wow, now I'm freaked out. No, just kidding. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's definitely my kid that doesn't eat as much as my other kids, and he's constantly, and it's not, I'm not sure like where it started. I mean, we definitely have a history in our little family of depression and anxiety and things like
Mhm.
that, that it could have stemmed from that, and that's something that we're working on healing and working through as a
Mhm.
family.
Right.
But it's definitely something where that it's, some of the things that we try to implement are, hey, let's get present here. Let's take some deep breaths. Let's
Mhm.
get present. Let's ask some questions that get them thinking rather than reacting and things like that,
Yep.
so that, we just start to calm down, and just constantly trying to connect with him, just is
Well,
part of
a
our
really great
strategy.
question. A great question you can ask him is, what else could it mean? Whatever he's upset about or focused on or fixated on, go, hey, that's great. What else could it mean?
Wow.
Well, what do you mean? Well, it could mean that, but what else could it mean? And it gets him going sideways now, and that takes the emotion down because you start to get curious, and then you shift that focus, right? And so, as parents, one of our biggest powers is the power of questions, because whether you agree with it or not, whether the question is real or not, your brain always answers the questions. Like, do you still have a polka dotted tree in your backyard? And your
Pause.
brain just answered it, because
What?
that's what brains do. They go, "There's never been a tree
Yeah.
like that in my backyard." What? But the brain always answers the questions it's given. So you could even tell him when he's like when he's getting worked up about something, say, "Now's not the time to calm down. We'll do that in a few minutes." But for right this second, what else could it mean?
Mm.
And when I said now is not the time to calm down, the brain deletes the word not, and it just heard now calm down. So I'm talking to his unconscious mind to slow him down a little bit. And then we can now ask the question to focus him sideways. And I've taken him off that point that he was at. We're switching gears down, and then we're sliding sideways. This is where it's helpful having a hypnotherapy background.
Wow. And does it help to even when you say it's not the time to calm down, do you think that also gives them permission to be like, "Oh, it's okay to feel this way," in a
Absolutely.
way? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I very rarely make people wrong for what they feel. What you feel is what you feel.
Yeah.
It may be based on wrong information, but the feeling is real and you're allowed to feel it. With my wife, she was in a previous relationship and she was made wrong for her feelings all the freaking time. And the person she was with would be like, come back and talk to me when you're in control. And I'm like, nah, let's have that fight. Let's go right now. I'm fine. I'm not scared because I love you. I'm going to be here one way or the other. Let's go. And just that, giving her that freedom to allow her access to her emotion, not make her wrong for that. She's more open with me than she has been anybody in her whole entire life. And it's been a great treasure to experience that. But I don't know how not to be otherwise, because you're equal with me and we're together in this and you're
Yeah.
my teammate and you're allowed to feel what you feel. I'm allowed to feel what I feel. Doesn't make it right, but it is. So let's go.
How do you do that? How do you approach that and then keep your own feelings level? I mean, obviously you have those skills, but what's some tips and ideas like your child or your spouse is upset, they're screaming, they're angry or whatever, they have these big feelings. How do you like not take that personally or
Oh, I
how
take
do
it
you
personally sometimes.
Okay, okay.
I'm a problem solver.
So what is
It's
your
like
response? Like how do
sometimes
you
sometimes
balance
I
that?
throw back energy and sometimes it's not pretty. And we've had some pretty intense arguments. I have been hit with a banana once, a whole clump one time. I said something and I got flung this whole thing of bananas got flung at me. And then we both started laughing because that was a great pattern interrupt. So
Mm,
part of it is I'm allowed to feel what I feel and I'm going to react and I'm going to spark occasionally too. But then it's take a deep breath, get centered, and that's a discipline to just choose whatever else is going on. Don't say the thing back that I could, because my wife and I have made an agreement. We would rather be in love first, be right second. And so,
love it.
because of that, sometimes you have to bite your tongue and just shut up and listen and let the other person just spew and let them get it out, because then you start listening for their heart, not listening for their words. And then you begin to understand, oh, this is venting about something nothing to do with me. I powder kegged. Okay, cool. I know how to show up now. Or no, I did fail. I forgot this piece and it set things up and it made things more complicated. And I need to own that, apologize, and then what can I do to resolve the situation? So there's always she's communicating to me. I know she's coming from positive intent and she wants me to understand what she's going through. It's not a personal, but it feels that way. And I feel like I let her down and I'm upset with myself. Now I've got to separate I'm upset with myself versus what does she need? What do I need? How do I need to show
Wow,
up?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's being able to take that deep breath, center yourself, and then also, we do pattern interrupts. We intentionally just do these non sequiturs and do these random things to break the person's emotional pattern, not make it
Okay.
wrong, but just kind of interrupt it.
Yeah.
Like somebody's really upset, you just pour water on their head. Now they're mad and
Okay,
wet
okay.
because now they're mad and wet. But if it's summertime and we're outside and now we can have a water fight for a few minutes. I mean, it's just things like that. So I'm not
Yes.
that's always the answer to everything is dump water in their head. But
But well, I get this idea of the pattern interrupt because like a book that I read that I really appreciate is it's called The Powerful Engagement.
mhm,
And that one I really love it because it talks about that and how important it is that, we we have these like peaks and valleys in our energy And
Mhm.
so to honor the valleys, to just do like a pattern interrupt, to say, I've been going for the last hour, 2 hours, however long, and now I need this interrupt to be able to recover and reestablish, let myself go into this, the ebb and flow
Mhm.
of the natural, the way that our energy naturally ebbs and flows.
Absolutely.
So I can definitely understand that idea. Like if you guys are in the height of the stress sequence of the ebb and flow, then it's time to have that pattern interrupt so that you can
Mhm.
just
Yeah, and
change
label it too,
direction.
because ritualize it. And I need to go in the cave. I need to shut down for 5 minutes. I need to go do corpse meditation. Right? Give each other permission to take those outs and get your recharge. It's not a denouement of you, and I think you're ineffective or incapable, or I don't want to be around you. It's for me to show up more fully. I need to go shut down for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Absolutely. We have time for that. Look at the schedule. Here's what's going on. Here's what needs to happen next. Yeah, absolutely. Go take some time. And we can start to tell kind of when one of us starts to run on fumes a little bit and be like, hey, you're fuming. Why don't you go get some quiet time? Go watch an
Yeah.
episode of, go listen to some meditation, go shut off.
Go do
Um,
something that's funny.
yeah. And
Laugh.
we do the same thing for the kids. If the
Yeah.
kids need to recharge and they just need a few minutes. So when I met my stepson Jamie, he was 3, and so when he was 4 and he was starting to resist naps a little bit, but we gave him this idea. I gave him this idea. Well, human beings are like batteries. When the game runs low because the batteries are low, you got to recharge. Well, taking a nap recharges your battery. And then he started to become more aware of, like, he's like, my batteries are low. I need to go recharge. And so
Wow.
his way of saying I need to go take a nap. And now my daughter is 5 and she's still taking naps, but she's got a thyroid issue and was 14 weeks
Mm.
early. So she does the same thing. She's like, I'm getting tired. I think I need a nap. And they're just starting to recognize a little bit extra whiny, a little bit rough around the edges, a little bit just fighting everything. And everything is what we call squeaky wheel. All right, you need to go recharge. It's cool. We got you. Why don't you go flop down for about half an hour, and then we'll come and get you.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. You hear that, everybody? There's a tip to get your toddlers, your preschoolers to take a nap. You walk away with nothing else from this conversation. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, yeah, just go recharge your batteries. It's cool.
But
We got
it's so important. You're exactly right. I homeschool my kids, and so it's like,
you.
we can't just like go all day long. You just can't. It's not
Yeah.
healthy, it's not normal. And so, throughout the day, it's like, "Oh, okay, I think it's time to go get a snack, or I think it's time to sing some songs instead of pushing through the books or whatever. I think it's time to, let's watch a funny video that just kicks our giggles in gear or something."
Yeah. 5-minute
It's
dance
so
party,
important.
go.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, they need to do that
So I
in
love
regular
that.
too. They need to do 5-minute dance party, 2-minute
Oh,
dance.
absolutely.
They need that
Absolutely.
because kids process and they digest intellectually, emotionally through random association and free play, not through structure. So they need that to just have the neurons bouncing into each other and bouncing around is how they process. So they need more time unstructured and just free to do a careen around. So yeah, definitely get
Wow.
that. And adults do more than we get as well.
So do you do this in your work at all with the kids that you work with? You do a lot of damage control from public school?
I wouldn't call it damage control. We just it's not even, I don't even think of it as, yeah, I don't think of it as damage. I don't think of it as control. We just look at alignment
Okay.
and look at,
Alignment. Okay, I
because,
like that.
right,
That's a
well, see,
better way.
if a bad guy's going to attack you, right, you got this big energy coming at you. I can try and suppress that energy. I can try and stop that energy, which takes more energy, or I could just redirect it, right? Catch it. It
Yeah.
requires a better sense of timing, a better sense of awareness. But if I can catch that energy and just as it's coming towards me, move it over here slightly, a lot less effort, and allow them to kind of overextend themselves, then they have all kinds of openings that are self-evident. Very easy, right? Not that we're lazy, we're just efficient because it's better
Hmm.
marketing. But it's the idea that, if I have to correct something, that presupposes it's wrong. So I don't correct anything. I just offer adjustments. And then if it makes sense, if it feels contiguous, if it works for you, if it makes your life easier, great, use it. So with the kids,
Yeah.
it's just going into different conversations or different directions or different energies and just exploring that and going, well, that's an interesting point of view. Here's one way to see it, but what about this? And then I can give 2 or 3 other variations and then allow them to come to their own conclusions because it's their life and their consequences, not mine. So
Hmm.
it's not my job to tell them how to live or what's important. I can't answer that, right? Same when it comes to self-defense. I can't tell you how far you're going to go to defend your life because it's not my life. I know how far I'll go. I have my answers. and I have questions for you. And if as you give me your answers, I can help you develop skills. Will you hurt another human being? Will you maim them? Will you make them cease to exist? Are you willing to go that far? And if you're not, that changes things. But if you are, that changes things too. And so I can't tell you what you should do. I can't tell you in the heat of the moment because it's your life and someone else's life. I can just provide context and guidance. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. I like that. I like that. It gives me clarity to, something that going back to this whole trust concept that I like to talk about, because, in my, when I talk about family culture, I use this analogy that like a road trip, and you have your identity is your vehicle, things like that. And actually the fuel of your vehicle is trust,
Hmm.
and it gets you going forward. Because
Hmm.
if you are trying to put fear or manipulation or anything like that in your vehicle, you're going to stall, you're not going to grow. and
Right.
and I like that, this idea, like saying, it's not, don't put a negative connotation on things, because it's just, you're going in a direction, not trying to run away from your fear or the things that are just, you're trying to go towards something that's productive, and that takes trust, that takes faith, it takes, going forward with intention,
Hmm.
rather than being reactive to something that you're interpreting as negative.
Correct. And a lot of well-meaning different types of structures that people put around things, they try to do and drive a certain direction, but there's an implicit dichotomy in there that sometimes they forget. And so I try to avoid that stuff and not force things into it has to be this way or that way. Um,
Yeah,
like we don't want our kids to fail. Well, no, they need to fail. You move through failure to arrive at success. What? Because people have this
yeah,
idea, failure's over here, success is over here, and you go away from one towards the other. No, success is here and it's wrapped in failure, and you go through different types of failure to learn exactly what not to do anymore until you arrive at the result of what you do want to do. And so then it's like, what did you learn? What are you not going to do again? Fantastic. You're still alive. Great. Game on. Keep going. And
wow,
and you destigmatize because you watch a
yes,
little kid, they're learning to walk, they fall down in the kitchen. They don't go, I can't walk in the kitchen. Then they fall down in the living room and go, I can't walk in the living room. They don't do that because their goal
yeah,
is, I want to walk. This crawling thing is okay, but I want to walk that looks cool. But in life, well, you didn't succeed with swimming, and you didn't succeed with baseball, and you didn't succeed with and whatever the thing. And we contextualize the result versus well, what did I really want? And like you said, finding the right vehicle that's going to get me there, that wasn't as comfortable as, right?
right,
Versus, well, you always quit everything. Well, I quit the things that don't enrich my soul. So I'm
yeah,
still looking for the things that enrich my soul, right? So it's just staying kind of focused on that outcome and not make wrong the things that you're not doing anymore, because what you might not like, somebody else might love. And
yeah,
we're dealing with this with Evie because when certain food, she's like, that's disgusting. And I'm like, hey, that's not a nice thing to say because somebody may really love that food. So you can just say that's not for me. You can say that's not my favorite. You can say no, thank you. Those are much better things because you could hurt someone's feelings because they offer you something that means a lot to them. And then you say that's
yeah,
disgusting. Would you want someone to say that to you? Well, no. Oh, okay. So if you don't like it, don't do it. And so we're
wow,
building with her kind of that awareness to, it's okay to have standards. It's okay to have boundaries, but it doesn't mean you have to rub everybody else's faces in your standards.
wow. That, so much of what you just said, I'm like, yes, 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 that's awesome. So thank you for sharing that. I just, especially this idea of destigmatizing things and not having this definitive, but having a balance around, this is what's right for me or not.
Mhm.
And this is a process that I'm going through to discover myself and my capabilities,
Absolutely.
and things like that. Not that, because as soon as you start putting like finite labels on things, right? I'm stupid, or I'm a
Mhm.
failure, or I these kinds of things. Again, that goes back to what you were saying about when we punish ourselves, so we're saying I did something or I'm bad, right?
Right.
Versus I did something bad, you
Exactly
know?
it. Exactly it. Your identity starts to shift, and then the most powerful thing inside of us is the desire to maintain our identity. However
Right.
we define ourselves, we will self-sabotage to get back, right? Kids that are
Yep.
raised in stressful environments, kids that are raised on stress hormones, that's what they're used to. Then they get into a healthy environment where there's no stress. They get bored. They get, this is meaningless. This is stupid. I don't know what to do, because they're so used to running on cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline. They're so used to having all this anxiety and stuff. When they don't have it, it doesn't feel real. It feels false. Like they're waiting for it. It's going to go back to how it normally is, because that's how they grew up.
Right.
And so they self-sabotage perfectly healthy situations, perfectly amazing relationships they destroy, because their biochemical levels are set to run at a higher stress environment. Unless, and that's where you do things like meditation, can
Yeah.
help to kind of reset that internal chemistry and that association of those chemicals. But we're
Wow.
seeing a lot of kids that there's turmoil at home, there's stress at home, and then they're creating that because that's what's comfortable to them. That's what they know as normal. And so a lack of that stuff is weird. And people who grew up in a peaceful environment go, what are you doing? You're causing so much drama. You're making things so harder for everyone. Why do you have to be so jealous and argumentative? And they're going, but that's like normal. That's how, if you're not jealous, you don't care.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
models of the world are incredible. When you start noticing how people model their version of the world and go, well, that's very interesting perspective.
Huh. And to look at it as saying this is an interesting perspective, not you're toxic or things like that. Or
But if you want to influence somebody, you got to have some sort of rapport and some sort of relationship. And if you judge them, you kill your ability to do anything.
yes.
So how does it help? Say, well, you're toxic. Okay, great. F you. Your life is all pansies and
Yep.
butterflies, right? And all that does
Yep.
is that it just cuts people apart and disconnects more, and it adds more to the problem of what's going on.
So that's I love that topic. That is definitely something that I get excited about when you start saying when you start throwing around judgments, you create barriers, and I absolutely agree
Mhm.
with you because I think as parents it's so tempting to judge and I just want to like knock parents on the head like stop it. Just stop it. Like
Then what should
stop
they do?
judging.
Instead of
That
judging, what should you do?
that is the question I was going to ask you like so where's that balance though?
Yeah, well, it's easy. You stop judging, you start evaluating.
Okay.
Because when you evaluate something, you're looking at, right? So if we go back and study natural medicine and you look at where like aspirin came from, I believe it came out of like white willow bark, and they isolated out this compound and said this compound's super awesome and it does all this great thing, and now we got this aspirin, yay. And now, century later, we're going back to the original source, going, wait, there's all these other compounds that buffered it in context that, oh, that had another impact that we didn't fully realize, because they were so focused on what was the efficacy of the drug. They wanted to get the most powerful version, but now because it's the most powerful, it's like running a lightning bolt through people sometimes, and it causes other impacts. So there's this
Oh
other
yeah.
context that matters. So take tobacco from the Native American tradition. It was used as part of a religious situation and ritualism. Took that out and just made it this thing, and people just kind of went gongo with it. And again, causes impacts. Native Americans didn't really have issues with cancer, but they weren't smoking cigarettes on a day-to-day basis. It was a medicinal purpose. It was a magical purpose. It was a spiritual purpose. And so when we take something from one context and we put it into another, we have to ask ourselves two big questions. Number one, is it attainable? Meaning, can we even make it fit? And then number two, is it sustainable, or we call the ecology of it? So I take this out of one situation. I see somebody in their life doing a certain thing and go, oh, that looks really cool. That looks really interesting. Let me take that and put it into my life and then see, how does it work?
Hmm.
And does it work? Does it enhance, or does it come with costs? Does it impact? Because then if it starts to draw me down, if it starts to limit my life, that's not something I'm going to do. But I can have gratitude for that person showing me a model of humanity. 7.5 billion people means 7.5 billion styles of human.
Hmm.
That doesn't work for me. It seems to be working for them to some degree. Doesn't work for me. But at least I had that awareness now. I can choose not to do that. And I can say thank you to them. I can have gratitude and appreciation for that. I can evaluate that in my life and go, that's not something that works for me. And then I stop. Not,
Yeah.
and it doesn't work for anybody else, and no one should have access to it. We need to ban that thing and get the government involved, and we need to tax it. And people stack all of this control.
Yep.
And it's like, but you can't control any of that stuff. All you can control is your own life, and all you can influence is the people that you can influence. So back up, slow down, don't take that next jump. Just say, this doesn't work for me, and here's why.
Hmm.
And here's where I got that reference, and here's what I appreciate about that. Here's what I understand from that. And then you stop.
Yeah.
because
Don't
then,
attach a story to it. Don't attach more meaning to it
right.
than it needs.
Well, you
Yeah.
attach the story of gratitude and you say, and that's
Hmm.
where it ends, because now I can evaluate that situation and go, does that work for me or not? And then it allows you to be less personal, because the moral judgment about who's right or who's wrong, who's better, who's worse, there's so much context in that. The way our body works, our conscious mind runs somewhere between 50 and 137 bytes of data a second. Our unconscious mind is somewhere between 2 million and 11 million bytes of data a second,
Right.
which means that there's literally, in any given moment, millions upon millions upon millions of different interpretations of every single second of your entire life. So maybe don't get so upset or so attached or so quick to be so judgmental and so stuck on one point, because there's a lot of other things going on you might not be aware of.
Wow.
And that allows that distance and kind of step back for a second and just, okay, I don't have to run that far that fast.
Take those deep breaths. Get your
Well, you started there.
neurological pathways
That's right. That's
control.
right. Get centered, because then you start to realize there's a bunch of stuff, politics, marketing, news media. They're all designed to get us tilting at windmills. They want to get a limbic response. They want to get us in a stress response, because then emotion goes high, intelligence goes low, and people make emotional knee-jerk reactions. That's good for controlling people. I
Wow.
don't like being controlled. I don't want to have to control anybody else. So
Yeah.
how can I help you to have more of your own control, and you can make your own choices, you can live your own life, and your life and my life that enriches both of us, we both win. That's the game.
Wow. I love that. Thank you. Wow, this is thank you, Jeremy. This has been really awesome and like so much. I think we could go on and on. I mean, even just that you brought up media literacy in this discussion is like, oh, yes, they want us to be polarized. That's the point. Yeah, I mean, there's so much that we can learn about this, so much we can understand and how we interact with our children, how we interact with our family members,
Right.
and how much it speaks to our family culture. You know, when we want to have an intentional, that's what I talk about. I talk about having an intentional family culture. And
Mhm.
to me that means like what you're saying, be present, be mindful, be aware, and just come from a place of evaluation and compassion and balancing that power and warmth of how you interact with each other. So I just every that's thank you so much. So where can my audience find you and learn more about all this?
Well, I'm kind of everywhere. I have not picked a social media to go dominate yet and do all that stuff. So I am on Facebook. There's Jeremy R. The Kung Fu Guy is my personal. Jeremy Roadruck is my professional, and I kind of post in both places. Instagram at Kung Fu Guy Jeremy, YouTube at Kung Fu Guy Jeremy. I have the Parenting Program Show podcast that comes out on Tuesdays, and what else? I have a best-selling book, Your Best Child Ever is This Game Worth Winning. I'll give you guys the links for that. It's available for free. You can go buy it on Amazon if you want. That's nice. Or you can get the free PDF as a digital download. Just put your email in and you can download the PDF.
Oh, cool.
So there's a bit.ly for that. And then I'm also starting an online program. Oh, I have a parenting group on Facebook that is Win-Win Parenting, win/win parenting. And
Mm-hmm.
then I have an online course, and I'm also doing some one-on-one consulting with people
Wow,
that
cool.
are having some challenges, and just how can we get some resolution in your family, get better communication, better energy flow,
Yeah.
better resonance with each other. Um, because
Wow.
there's a lot of I see a lot of families with a lot of love,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just a skills mismatch, and it's
Yep.
just, or it's fear. Parents came up in a hard situation. I don't want my kids to be in that same situation, but absent any other models, we default to what we've experienced under
Yep.
stress, right? So we
Yep.
find ourselves, every parent I know of has always run something where they swore they would never say this, and then something happens and they're spewing their mom or they're spewing their dad at their kids inside their head saying, shut up, shut up, shut up. The
Uh-huh.
stuff is spewing out because that they haven't replaced the model. So you'll run the program. Same thing we see in self-defense. If we don't teach people how to get out of grabs, they panic, they freeze, they run certain patterns until we replace the training. And then it's like, oh, they get so much more power.
Wow. That's awesome. That's totally, that's what this whole message about when I started investigating about family culture,
Mm-hmm.
that's what that comes back to. You know, whatever we grew up with, that perpetuates until we do a life pattern interrupt, right? And
Absolutely.
going, this has to stop. I don't want this
When we grow
anymore.
up and we think that's normal, whether we liked it or we
Mhm.
hated it,
Yep.
unconsciously that is normal.
Yeah.
right? There's a movie by Terry Gilliam, and he comes out like in the beginning of the movie and kind of explains the point of it, but it gets pretty dark. But there's a dad, and he's a drug addict, and he ends up, the daughter's like helping him do drugs, and then he ends up dying, and she doesn't know he's dead for like 3 days.
Oh my goodness.
But his point was the resilience of the human spirit, because she didn't know that wasn't normal,
Right.
right? Because for her, that's just
Yeah.
what dads do, and that's what daughters do, and that's just normal. And so that's
Wow.
where we have to be really careful about that judgment stuff, because
Yep.
what we think everybody should know, that's what I struggled with as a kid. What I thought everybody should know, nobody knew. Because I realized at 6, what you say and what you mean are two separate things. Why?
Yeah.
And nobody could tell me. No one knew what I was even asking about when I tried to
Uh-huh.
explain, because they didn't
Because it was
understand.
so normal to them. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the bifurcation of language? There's implicit and explicit, and then you get in transactional analysis, and there's the child, the adult, and the parent, and there's different levels of communication. Like I understand all that stuff now, but as a kid back then, ah, so much confusion, and it's like,
Yeah,
why? I
kids are
don't.
so literal. Kids are so literal. They don't get all that stuff.
That's one of the things. Little kids are literal, teens are not, and that's one of the hallmarks for when you have a child that switches from child to teen.
Mm.
So when you have a
Wow, we could do a
6-year-old,
whole other episode on that, I think.
well, when you have a 6-year-old who's not literal, that's usually they're either really brilliant, or something has happened and they've switched gears before they were supposed to. Because you're not really
Wow.
supposed to go to teenage brain until somewhere between 10 and 12.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay, guys, go find Jeremy Roadruck. Go find.
I've been
He's
doing this
now
for
come,
35 years. Where I
yeah,
live.
that's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here on the show and sharing
My
your
pleasure.
wisdom and energy. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Absolutely. It's been a blast. Thank you, Jodi.